Yeah, right. In fact, yes, I'm just staring there at the red little box up there. Good morning, everybody. We are here to do a final run through on H13. And Jen has made some updates just as a result of the final conversation that we had. And why don't you just briefly run through them, Jen?
Sure. So good morning, Jennifer Carby from the Office of Legislative Counsel. We just
And the version is on your website.
yes, we are looking at draft 3.3. And this is H13, an act relating to Medicaid payment rates for home and community-based service providers and designated and specialized service agencies. You will see at the end, I'm proposing a new title. So this is showing markup from the previous version that we looked at. And so in section 1, in the definitions, in the definition of home and community-based services, first there was a request to, in the head of the table, to remove the word physical modifying disabilities, because we're talking about broader categories in what we're doing in this definition. In subdivision 7B, I've struck the services for individuals with traumatic brain injury because we moved those to individuals with a brain injury more generally to subdivision C. And in that one, we have short and long-term services and supports provided to, and that's language you've seen before, individuals with mental conditions, individuals with substance use disorders, individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities, and individuals with a brain injury in a home or community setting for which the Medicaid rates are not otherwise established pursuant to statute or rule.
I think that does that perfectly. Right.
All right, then we get to, so now we're in section 2.
I'm sorry. I do have a question, and that's, so if this does become law, then eventually these Medicaid rates will be established. So if it says in here that they're not otherwise established, is that
Not
what?
otherwise, meaning like nursing homes, if there's other rules that cover other services.
This is in the definition of home and community-based services.
Yeah. All right.
Where the intention is, we're not going to disrupt anything that exists in existing rules.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, section 2 is payment rates for providers of home and community-based services. And here the change that we've made is on page 3. I'm taking this out of rulemaking and instead have the Secretary of Human Services establish a methodology, not adopt rules setting forth a methodology for determining payment rates for providers of home and community-based services. And then it says what the methodology must do. And we've added some things based on your conversation last week.
Go ahead, Doug.
In 2, there's a set forth predictable timeline. Does that differ from the reference above to schedule?
Yes, that's a schedule for rate studies. 2 is a timeline for redetermination of base rates.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so yes, we have provide the rate study schedule, and we said it has to be at least once every 5 years for providers of each type of service. The predictable timeline for redetermination of base rates, a process for determining an annual inflationary rate adjustment, and we have to the extent permitted by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, take into account the financial needs of providers whose reimbursements may be negatively affected by client absences. Include a process by which a provider whose financial condition places it at imminent risk of closure may seek extraordinary financial relief from the agency. I use some of the language from the rules on nursing home rate setting. And then just renumbered Vermont labor market rates and costs of operation. Then in section 3, we have just a very minimal bit of language left in the existing statute after these amendments for the rates of payment to the DAs and SSAs. It basically just says Secretary of Human Services shall determine, so not just have responsibility, but shall determine the various departments' rates of payments for the DAs and SSAs, but then it points us over to the section we just looked at in accordance with 33 VSA section 11.
So, can you just say a little bit about what we're doing is connecting Title 18 and Title 33?
Exactly, yes. So we're not, instead of having similar or parallel provisions in two different titles that are doing the same thing for related service providers, we're instead just putting a reference in Title 18 to Title 33 that says the rates will be, go over there and look. So that it's easier for somebody to follow who's reading the statutes and looking for the rates for the designated and specialized services agencies.
So does that means we're putting in the green books and statute, the January 2026 update report?
Nope, haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Back up.
that's section 3. So now we'll go to section 4.
I was looking at, yes, thank
On
you.
page 5.
Question about section 3. You've got, we have C on page 3. About rates, setting rates, right? Payment rates, determining payment rates. 1, 2, 3, and 4 refer to setting payment rates. Is 5 actually something separate other than, should that be D, if you will, rather than number 5 in the list? Because it's kind of doing something separate and different
It could
than
be.
payment rates.
It could,
Yeah, I mean, 3 is including a process for,
right, but I think the difference is, right, it's 3 is still rates, 5 is extraordinary financial relief outside of rates.
Outside
So
of rates.
that does make sense to move to a subsection D. Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Um,
so then that would move the cost of operation up to 5,
Right,
right? Because that was
Yes.
still included.
Yeah, so 6 becomes 5, and then 5 becomes D, and D becomes E. Good, I like need in language to make sense with everything in the list, so I appreciate that. All right, section 4 on page 5 is the payment rates for providers of home and community-based services. And instead, this was going to be the rate study. This is now an update on implementation. And so this would have by January 15th of 2026, the Agency of Human Services report to this committee, the Healthcare Committee and Senate Health and Welfare Committee, with an update on their implementation of the provisions of Section 2, including the agency's proposed schedule for Medicaid rate studies and the methodology the agency developed for determining payment rates for providers, excuse me, of home and community-based services. And then finally, we cross out everything that was in earlier section 4. Section 5 is still the effective date, but we delete the references to the rulemaking. It would just take effect on passage. And then at the very bottom of page 6, I suggested proposing to change the title after passage to be an act relating to Medicaid payment rates for home and community-based service providers, and taking out that separate reference for the designated and specialized service agencies, because we've combined them all under that home and community-based services umbrella. And then for those of you who are new to this, at the very end of an amendment, there is a space for the committee vote and for the member who is reporting the bill on the floor to sign and print their name, although since most of this happens electronically now, that information is just sent to the clerk's office rather than actually put on the form. So I will take it down and work on that amendment if you want to, revision to do that. If you want to.
Are there any questions, comments? Go ahead, Doug.
Last question on page, back to page 3 again.
Yeah.
C4, and this was amended since I last printed it, but talking about the attendants, trying to be as supportive as possible so they're not negatively affected by a client's absence. Are we, would CMS rules prohibit us from being as strong as saying paid on an enrollment basis rather than attendance basis?
Well, we had that thought that thought was in there but I didn't want to just limit, the possibility of how the reimbursements happen. So it could be that, it could be, setting a sort of a base occupancy rate, if you will. There's multiple ways that it could happen to take into consideration, absences. So, prescribing a certain way in this case didn't make sense.
Limited.
Yeah,
More
it'd be
limiting.
more limiting, right?
Great, thank you.
And we'll have the opportunity when they come back with their methodology next year, to, further comment on that and whether we think it's adequate or not.
I'm continuing to noodle on the original question from Representative Eastis about the not otherwise established. Rates are not otherwise established, and it gets a little circular once you're using that in the definition. So I might say for which the Medicaid rates are not set pursuant to section 911 of this chapter or otherwise established pursuant to statute or rule. I just want to make it clear that we're not, because we are establishing them in 911. And while these flow sections 1 and 2 in the bill in statute, they're going to go 900, 10 more sections, and then 911. I think it may.
So will you say again what it is that you're?
Yes, I'm sort of thinking through it here. Let me put the language back up on the screen.
Line 4 and 5 on page 2.
Yeah, so where we have in a home or community setting for which the Medicaid rates are not set pursuant to, I'm thinking section 911 of this chapter or otherwise established pursuant to statute or rule.
So to me, that sets up a circular argument.
Well, I
Right.
think it does.
They are.
It doesn't. I can undo it.
There's a, what's Medicaid rates?
Because in the definition, don't we want, these are the people who are going to be under
Under these
9/11.
provisions.
Right. What's-
not who are not established under 9/11.
I didn't even just think about this. I am concerned about creating confusion.
I'm just changing taking out a few knots and adding a few things in and seeing what circumstances seem to arise. And it seems to me that, is it possible, is there some, I don't know the system well enough, but is there some way in which once a rate gets set, then this is no longer.
Right, I think that's the at least from a confusing standpoint, a sense of confusion, I think that's where your point resonates with me, where once 911 is operationalized, once, this new section is operationalized, the rates for these folks will be established by statute. In which case, are we taking them out of our definition?
We don't want to take them out.
We don't want to take them out of their own right. We don't want to take them out of their own definition. So,
And why do we need,
Previously.
could we, with a brain injury in a home or community setting, period?
So that was the whole discussion that started around, how do you define a home or community setting, given that the agency sometimes calls what we might think of as institutional settings that have rates set
They
in
call it-
community
I
settings.
see.
Right.
So that was what we were trying to clean up with this language, and we were struggling with different ways to do it.
But have not,
Jen, I'm gonna propose, which I know is not always a good thing to do, but I'm gonna propose that we leave it as it is for our vote today, and that will give you time to noodle on it as it makes its way through downstairs. If there's something that you think will add clarity, does that seem okay?
yes, welcome, input from committee members.
Yeah.
Or
I'm
there's,
just
if there's a
feeling
better way of saying it. Maybe I'll talk to the agency too and see if we can come up with a way to.
yeah, I mean, they didn't provide any feedback about this particular,
No, but they may not have thought about it that way.
right, in that way.
I think it's a valid point. I mean,
Yeah.
the statutes are to be read at their ongoing point in time. And so I think once rates are set, are established pursuant to this statute, it gets confusing about what
Well,
we
and
mean.
that's why the word otherwise makes it clear for me, but if it's not clear in, I understand what Zahn is saying and what you're trying to noodle over.
Because we've seen, 10 or 15 years later, everybody sitting around saying, well, what exactly?
Did that mean?
Right,
Does that
otherwise than what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Were not established prior to the enactment of this section or of this provision?
Well, again, when you're reading it in time and it gets amended over the years, I mean, we could put a date certain that we're not established. I don't know, prior to, or not established prior to January 1st, 2025,
Whenever the final date, yeah,
because that's a date certain that has already passed.
yeah.
But what would that do to new programs that get established that we wouldn't consider to be?
Right, facility based.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let me chat with some AHS folks and see if we can come up with
okay.
maybe, a better way to set the home and community settings.
That sounds.
Describe them like
Yeah, I appreciate what Anne brought up because there is I think probably a difference of interpretation in what sometimes we consider a community-based setting, what AHS considers a community-based setting, don't always match up. So this was the descriptive piece that we had tried to.
Secure residents.
I get that,
For
yeah,
developmental.
Yeah.
Forensic,
yes.
Now, here, I will put up on the screen for a moment the other change we discussed that I made, just so you can see what that would look like. So this is in C, we're on page 3. And so for the methodology for the rates, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I've moved down to D. This, that the secretary will establish a process by which a provider whose financial condition places it at imminent risk of closure can seek extraordinary financial relief. And then this becomes E.
Got it.
Guys, I think I said one last question last time, so don't get me on this.
Speaking 3 times.
Back to page 1 and
Page 1. Just kidding.
7A talks about long-term services and supports provided to older adults and adults with disabilities in a home or community setting other than a nursing home, including enhanced residential care services. This is where maybe new eyes on it. Are residential services included in nursing homes? Or are they included in the list prior to nursing homes?
It was prior to nursing homes.
Yeah.
So they're included in this rate setting methodology. And they're specifically called out here because of confusion previously about whether they were included or.
And so there's no, in people more familiar with this, there's no confusion about whether enhanced residential care services are part of nursing home.
No.
No. Okay.
Good. So then that leads me to think that we, in having these definitions as we've created in here in 7, is that not sufficient enough to take care of the 7C on the next page? It's well enough that it's not.
No.
No, because there's AMIs and others.
All right. Still learning.
Complicated system.
Thank you for asking the questions and thanks for the fresh eyes on it. I mean, it helps.
Those are too embedded.
I was gonna say, those of us who have lived with these things for a long time, it's very, very helpful to have people looking at it with fresh eyes, so. Okay. Are we ready for a vote? Does anybody have any final questions? Is the clerk ready?
Yeah, just, So
And this
when I
will be very-
record this, do I use the new title or the title that's at the top?
I believe you still use the title that's at the top because it's after passage, but this will be 4.1 when I make you a clean copy of it.
Next question, 4.1, you said?
4.1. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So I will entertain a motion to approve draft 4.1 of H13
So moved. Oh,
and seconded.
second.
Okay,
Sorry, I missed the second.
and second's on first. Okay. The clerk shall call the roll.
Representative,
I'm sorry, just a minute. Is there any further discussion I should ask? Does everybody know what's happening right now? Because it's the first time they're going. Sure.
It's more formal than what we've done before.
This is right. This is for real now.
And I knew we were ready to vote. I was considering using my absent.
Oh, your absent vote.
Calling in and saying, can't.
Okay, all right, thank you, Dan.
Representative Bishop,
Yes.
Representative Cole,
Yes.
Representative Donahue,
Yes.
Representative Estes,
Yes.
Representative Garfano,
Yes.
Representative McGuire,
Yes.
Representative McGill,
Yes.
Representative Nielsen,
Yes.
Representative Noyes, yes. Representative Steady,
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes. Yay, our first bill.
And Doug, you'll always be first called.
Yeah.
So wait.
Okay, thank you very much, Jen. Appreciate your in the moment thinking about this. And I was sincere when I said to folks asking questions and clarifications, always helpful to have fresh eyes on something that we've worked with for a long time. So thank you. Okay.
A clean copy to you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. All right, we are moving on, folks. And this morning, we're continuing our saga on, oh, is he going to be in person?
He's in the CO3.
Pardon me?
He was in the CO3 pool.
Oh, okay, so he's gonna be here in person. Okay, so we'll wait briefly for the commissioner to show up. We can go offline, Lauren.